Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Youth Civic Engagement Symposium. My name is Mary Beulah, and I'm the director of Erie Together, a countywide movement that's very focused on helping young people become successful adults. One thing we know that leads to success for both people and for places is civic engagement, or getting involved in your community. There are lots of ways to do that, by voting, volunteering, running for public office, or working within government. That's why Erie Together is again partnering with Gannon University and U.S. Senator Pat Toomey's office to host this symposium. This is our 6th year to hold the event, and our goal is to help students better understand government, community, and the opportunities they have to get involved and make a difference. This year, we're doing the entire event virtually and have a lot of great sessions planned. You'll see a presentation on the U.S. Constitution by Peter Agresti, a professor and director of legal studies at Gannon University. You'll have access to 4 videotaped panel presentations made up of federal, state, county, and local government officials from the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. And this year, new to the event, you will hear a 5th panel presentation completely focused on community engagement and volunteerism. Finally, we'll wrap the entire event up with a live Q&A session so students can speak with our panelists and have their specific questions answered. We're always working to improve the symposium, and this year we've added a component we're really excited about. Through a partnership with Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit Number 5, we're making lesson plans available to teachers across Erie County so schools and students can get the most out of this incredible opportunity to learn from government and civic leaders. Special thanks to IU5 for creating those lesson plans for us. Finally, we wouldn't have been able to pull this off without the generosity of the National Fuel Gas Company Foundation and Erie Insurance, who have underwritten costs of videotaping and event planning respectively, or without the dedication and professional assistance from Community Access Media, who did a great job in capturing the speakers and pulling all the videos together. I know I speak for our entire planning team when I say how grateful we are to them and to our tremendous speakers who made this year's symposium possible. In closing, I'd like to also thank Gannon University and Senator Pat Toomey's office for the time and effort they put in to make today's event a success. And on behalf of Erie Together and all of our partners, we hope you enjoy the program as much as we've enjoyed putting it together.
Hello, my name is Keith Taylor, and I am the president of Gannon University. It is a pleasure to welcome you as we celebrate Constitution Day through the 2021 Youth Civic Engagement Symposium. This is a day to reflect on the importance of actively participating in life and in your community as an engaged citizen. We should recognize the tradition and strength of our Constitution and reaffirm our commitment to the rights and the responsibilities of citizenship in America. Gannon's mission reflects our commitment to developing socially responsible global citizens. Individuals that are able and willing to take their social responsibility seriously and act and lead in ways that benefit the greater good of our global community. Gannon finds its home in the city of Erie, an urban core of activity authorized through our U.S. Constitution. The federal courthouse, the county courthouse, and city hall are all within a block radius of campus. What a fantastic environment to live and learn and come to recognize the important role of each individual plays in the success of our society. I imagine our founding fathers would be amazed that the Constitution is as important today as it was to them 234 years ago. The preamble declares who is responsible for this Constitution: the people of the United States. The Constitution is owned, we might say, by the people, not by the government or any branch thereof. We, the people, are the stewards of the U.S. Constitution and remain ultimately responsible for its continued existence and its faithful interpretation. I'd like to thank our partners, Erie Together and U.S. Senator Pat Toomey's office, on this incredible series, and also want to thank you for your understanding of the importance of the Constitution and why we must remind others that without action, bringing the Constitution to life, it remains a piece of historic paper kept neatly and safely in Washington, D.C. Gannon is proud to be part of this event as we engage each day with our students in passionately developing socially responsible global citizens at a time when these words and attributes are so critically important to our country and to our society. We continue to hold the United States Constitution as a critical founding document that is meant to reach a more perfect union. May we strive for justice, inclusion, solidarity, and respect for all. Be safe, and God bless you and the United States.
Hello and welcome to Constitution Day. My name is Peter Agresti. I am the program director of the Legal Studies and Pre-Law program at Gannon University, and lucky enough to give you this little introduction on the Constitution. And it's one that I relish. I really enjoy being a part of Constitution Day, and I'm very thankful that I could be here with you guys. I'm actually a lawyer turned professor, so my affinity for the Constitution goes back even before law school. But it's encouraging to see that you're all here and engaged. I know some of you maybe have to be here, but regardless, it's good that you are and that you're paying attention because this is pretty important stuff. The Constitution is very impactful on all of us. And it's something that can be not only engaging, but even entertaining to talk about and discuss. It's something I like to bring up even in my classes, my legal studies classes. And believe it or not, there are a few students who don't love talking about it. Believe it or not, there are a few students who don't know that Constitution Day exists. I know what you're thinking. How dare they? I agree with you. But when I think about it, I could stay my hand a little bit. Maybe it's just a lack of understanding, is what I like to tell myself. And usually, once we get into it in class, even those skeptics seem to open up a little bit and actually do enjoy talking about it. So I know most of you probably have an understanding of the Constitution. Nevertheless, though, I think it's advantageous to maybe go over it a little bit. Open up that dialogue and conversation for something you guys can keep in mind when you're listening to the speakers throughout all the events of the day itself. I think that could be very beneficial, even if it's a refresher. Even if you already know it. Maybe it could stir something up in you that you could call back on later. So that's where I think we should start. And if we're going to start talking about the Constitution, it's probably best to go back to the very beginning. I mean, back to the start. The beginnings of the United States. What do you think of when you think of the very beginning? You think of the American Revolution, right? Yes, we won our independence. Awesome. Yes, we look good in those blue uniforms. Great. We're starting the country. A lot of people incorrectly assume that the Constitution was there from the very beginning, waving right there at the American flag. Not so much the case. In the very beginnings, we had the Articles of Confederation. To put it nicely, the Articles of Confederation were not the Constitution. They were not what we needed. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that phrase, you got to walk before you run. You got to crawl before that. And the United States was in something of like a pre-crawl phase in the very beginning. It was pretty shaky. We had 13 different states, former colonies at that time, and they were interested in going 13 different directions. They had 13 different priorities. During the Revolution, they had a common cause, but after that was over, not so much. The only overarching togetherness that was bringing them together that we had at the time was the Articles of Confederation. And as history would tell the story, the Articles of Confederation didn't quite cut it. They didn't have enough to keep everyone together. There wasn't enough teeth. And very quickly we found that a federal government under the Articles of Confederation couldn't enforce certain things. They weren't clearly defined. The Articles of Confederation were fairly opaque. Things that you might take for granted, like taxation. It was taxing to get that taxation. It wasn't working. And very quickly everyone figured out if this dream was going to be kept alive of the United States, something was going to have to be done. I think it's even inherent in the very name, right? We take it for granted now. The United States rolls off the tongue. USA, USA, USA. It's easy. But when you think about it, the United States, these were states that were used to being fairly autonomous. We got to bring them together. We need a system where it's advantageous for them to be together under one flag with one ultimate vision. We didn't have that. Here's where we start to get the conversation rolling to what eventually becomes the Constitution. And it takes some time. There's a lot of discussion that goes into what this Constitution would be. There was a lot of debate. There was a lot of arguments. But eventually, over time, through the Constitutional Convention, we get this document. This document that's going to become the foundation of what the United States builds off of. The document that still, even today in 2021, is incredibly relevant. And that's a document that's worth examining. At its heart, there was a lot of compromise inherent in this document. Remember, these states had very different priorities. All right, some states were much larger, some states much smaller. How are we going to weigh that under the Constitution? What's the government going to look like? All of this starts to come together. And this is a conversation that could last for an entire semester. But to break it down to some of its key elements, what are we looking for when we're talking about the Constitution? How those different states fit into the picture, now 50 of them. That's a big part of it. Checks and balances. It's a big part of it. One I like to touch on, separation of powers. Okay, we have 3 distinct branches under the Constitution. The first, the executive branch. Okay, that includes a lot of agencies, but most visibly, the President of the United States. You know, what powers can the President of the United States have? And at the same time, what limitations, term limitations, what he can and can't do. There's a lot of power behind the executive branch. But the Constitution wanted to throw out there that that couldn't be the end-all be-all either, that branch had to be balanced. So we get another branch, the legislative branch, Congress, right? How we pass a lot of our laws and how they could be elected in turn and all those rules and regulations and how that fits in. I mean, Congress in and of itself has some other layers of nuance, right? And the House of Representatives versus the Senate. Now, the House of Representatives, that's representation based on population. So if you're a bigger state, you could have more representation. But the Senate, on the other hand, has more equal representation. So small and large states alike could have just as much of a say. So all of this compromise and balance is inherent even in these parts of the Constitution. The third branch, the judicial branch, our court system, okay, covers a variety of different tiers of those courts, all the way down, differences between state and federal, all the way up to the tippy top, the supreme law of the land, the Supreme Court, right? And how they can view certain actions and weigh them against the Constitution. Is this constitutional or not? And why the makeup of that Supreme Court, the justices that sit on that court, is so important for how they weigh in on what's constitutional and what's not. So all of this kind of mixing together and the importance of this separation of powers. It's really not something you had seen before. The language in the Constitution. We the people, not just subjects of a crown, not revolving around a monarchy, but it's the people that are going to build this nation. I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind. The Bill of Rights are amendments to the Constitution. Now, usually when we talk about the Constitution, we like to kind of visualize it as the whole picture, including the amendments. But the first 10 amendments kind of memorializes the Bill of Rights. They're coming out, just right around the same time as the Constitution. So it's all kind of hitting at once. But the importance of the Bill of Rights, the importance of these amendments can't be understated. And even if you aren't immediately conscious of it in your mind, odds are you've heard of a lot of what's going on here in the Bill of Rights, just because of how impactful it is. Starting out with the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. These are cornerstones of of our country and what we could do and what we hold dear. Starting off right from the First Amendment. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Regardless of where you fall on that or how you see it, it's something that's still talked about today. Something that can't be understated. Fifth Amendment. Hear about pleading the fifth in court. Fifth Amendment, what the government can and can't do. Eventually we're talking about searches and seizures. This is all wildly important that may start in the late 1700s, but continues as America grows and thrives, that continues even today. And something we can call back on. An understanding of these things that could help us even today. Another element of the Constitution is showcasing the different tiers or the levels of government too. So yeah, you're starting, at the overarching federal government, what's tying us all together, and the levels of government there, even within the three branches. But then also down to the state governments, okay, and how all those could be a little different. Each state has its own individual constitution. Each state is given its own leeway and its own powers. They all work within the federal hierarchy, or the federal overarching government, sure. But they're allowed to do things too. So we're looking at Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania state government can do. Then even down to more local levels, we have the county government, the local governments. We can look to those officials that might even be the most impactful of all for us because they impact our day-to-day. But knowing how they all work together, knowing what can be done to get in those positions, incredibly important. And I think one of the great elements of Constitution Day is that you get to hear from people that have these positions. You get to hear their stories, you get to hear what they do, what their day-to-day is like, and how they all fit in as a puzzle piece to the larger picture. So that's wildly important too. I think my personal favorite element of the Constitution involves interpretation. My favorite because it's fun to bring up in class. Even those individuals who might not find the Constitution that wildly interesting or entertaining tend to get into those conversations. How we could look at the Constitution, as a static document. We're all reading the same lines, but we can interpret what those lines mean in multiple different ways. That's where things get interesting. There are some that could read those lines and interpret the Constitution in a way that they see fit. So there are some that look at the words themselves, how those words are defined, where commas and periods are, and how that should really shape how we look at what those lines mean, how they should be read. There are others that say, nay, we should look at this based on the intent, the framer's intent, perhaps even, behind these things that were written. And that should shape our interpretation. There are others still that say, nay to that, no. We should look at the Constitution as a living, breathing document that changes with the times. What could have been true in the 1800s might not be true today. That society itself should be the lens we look at these things through, and that meanings can change based on those changes. It could be a combination of those two. It could be something totally different. This is far from an exhaustive list, folks, trust me. But that's the beauty of it. There's no right answer. There's no definitive way to look at it. You could look at it however you want. And it makes for some great discussion. You could get different people reading the same lines and coming to very different conclusions. And as long as that conversation is done civilly, it could be really fruitful. Because just like an inherent ingredient in creating the Constitution was compromise, I think the interpretation of the Constitution could benefit from compromise as well. That you might not agree with how someone else looks at it, but you can understand it. And maybe somewhere in that middle ground is the sweet spot that's good for everybody, that can help America grow. So I really like talking about different interpretations. And that's something I want you to keep in mind too. Even the people you might hear from over the course of Constitution Day. You might not agree with everything they say, but maybe it can open your eyes to some understanding. Maybe it will get you thinking, even if you don't change your mind. You get to see that bigger picture, get to understand maybe where that compromise lies. And ultimately, this leads me to probably my most important point. The common denominator of Constitution Day, me? No, I wish. You're the common denominator. And that's why I'm so proud that you're all here and that you're all a part of this. Because ultimately, you guys are the future. You're the direction we're going with this. And I would invite you to really listen to the speakers you're going to hear today. Trust me, they are very impressive. It's a who's who in these different levels of government. So listen what they have to say. Hear their stories. If you were interested, maybe listen into how they got those positions. Maybe you could follow in those footsteps. Maybe you could be just as impactful on that level. Even if you don't want those positions, understanding them could be wildly beneficial too. You understand how this all works. You understand how it affects you. Maybe you can affect changes in other ways. Even if that's just, voting certain people into positions that you agree with. It all works as a part of that system. And let me tell you, I'm encouraged that you guys are all here, because if you're the future we're going to be looking at and you're already involved in the process, you're already starting to gain knowledge of the process, that's only going to be good for everybody. It's going to be beneficial. This is really impactful on what the shape of all of this is going to look like at the end of the day. I think one of the most promising aspects about the Constitution is this. It ties us all together, right? We all have different ideologies. We come from different walks of life. And seemingly recently, it's all too apparent, things that divide us, right? But I think when we're talking about the Constitution today and we're reflecting, it's even easier, I would argue, to remember what brings us together and our similarities. And trusting that even if we're coming at the Constitution from different interpretations, that we're all in it together and we're all building a future together. The bottom line is that you guys are that future. And I'm thinking we're in pretty good hands, if that's the case. So thank you all for coming. I would again encourage you to ask questions if you can, be engaged, and follow up, because you should be thankful for who we all have here today. But I'm telling you, they're open to anyone who wants to discuss these things further, especially those of you that might be hungry to be more involved. So chase that down, follow that. And that's what Constitution Day is all about. So I wish you guys luck. Thank you for coming. Enjoy.